I fought very hard. I was not willing to get finessed, as the kids say. Like the shower door, the window trim, that was a nightmare to put in. Like, hey, we have to build a custom size. Like, we didn't account for this. Can you pay for it? And I was like, absolutely not. After the tenant moved in, one of them just stopped working. My cortisol levels were not very healthy in the healthy range. I could be honest with the financials. I think that's would be helpful for everyone.
Two generations of homeowners on the show today who are going to talk about converting your garage to retire early. They used our sponsor Realm, and if at any point in this video you're like, I want to use that sponsor too, check out the link in the video description below. Zach's a super young guy, so it's really impressive to see somebody who's 23 and managing a whole construction project, soup to nuts. And we're going to dive into the details, kind of go through all of his advice. Zach and Mary Ellen, welcome on the show.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan.
Where exactly are you guys based?
We're based in the northern end of the San Fernando Valley, otherwise known as Granada Hills. So if you're from there, shout out you.
And then what jurisdiction? So when you're like applying for permits and stuff?
LA County.
When you started looking at retirement options for Mary Ellen, how close are you, by the way? You seem too young to be retiring.
You're sweet. I'm retiring at year end. This year, cool. End of December.
Right around the corner. I like it.
Right,
I like it. Good. So we won't keep you too long because you got parties to plan. But so you're coming up on retirement, and how did you first start thinking about an accessory dwelling unit?
I actually had Zach approach me. He thought it was a great idea, and he's the finance guy, so I really honor what he tells me, and he's very smart in that way. So he thought it would be a great idea. I know it was kind of a trendy thing, but he said, no, Mom, I think this will really help you in your retirement. You'll have some residual income coming in, and I think it'll benefit you in many, many ways. And I said, okay, go for it. So I pretty much gave him the reins.
That's a dream scenario, right? You've got somebody taking care of the whole project for you, Mary Ellen. All right, so Zach, from your perspective, is that how it happened?
Yeah, I mean, more or less, yes. I like that description of it. It made me smile.
Yeah.
I mean, long story short, I saw that LA was getting a little bit more friendly towards building ADUs regarding like their permitting process and the expedited form of that. And I had a couple family friends who are also thinking about building ADUs, and hearing a little bit about their journey kind of inspired me. And given like my mom's eagerness to retire, I was like, hey, this could be a great remedy for that. So that's kind of my thought process there.
Yeah. And around what year was this happening that you started having the conversation?
Yeah, we started having it probably at the end of 2022 and got fairly serious probably around April or May of 23.
Yeah. Okay. Starting that conversation is different in every family. So like it would be super helpful if you could share a little bit like how do you broach the subject? Is this kind of a regular thing for you where you talk about finances and retirement, or did you have to bring it up? Who brought it up? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I think I could take this one. I guess I could say I'm a go-getter. I'm fairly proactive on like knowing what's happening in like the world of where I exist. Um, yeah, I brought up the conversation. Thankful that my mom has a lot of trust in me. I kind of think it's just based off of like our close and relationship with each other.
That's awesome. Do you remember what she said? Like, just like, there's this cool thing. Have you heard about it? Or
yeah, I was like, hey, there's this cool thing. We should look into options here. It'll definitely speed up that retirement process, which was, I think, pretty impactful because, I mean, I don't know how truthful we want to get, but realistically, retirement was fairly far out from like a healthy financial standpoint. So increasing that, I guess, supplemental income or residual income was a huge step in kind of speeding that process and making it possible for her to retire at year end. So, yeah.
I feel actually it was a win-win all the way around because, I was considering retirement, and I think adding value to the home in general was also a good plus. and having Zach as my, foreman, so to speak, because he fortunately works remotely 100%. So he was here managing the whole project. And I worked outside the home. So I really wasn't here to have any kind of hands on with it. So I totally gave Zach the reins. And he handled it so beautifully and precisely. And I can't thank him enough. But I'm so glad I went with the decision.
Awesome. Well, so, and let's get into that. So, Zach, you kind of have the conversation with mom. You're like both on board with doing this kind of project. Did you have a budget in mind? How did you start doing the research?
Yeah, I think this is a like a very interesting question that you brought up because looking at different financing options and meeting with multiple contractors, I always was put off with the question of like, hey, what's your budget? Because I think the real question is like, how much does it cost to build something? I think the budget question is almost like working backwards to some degree. So I guess long story short is I was thankful for Realm at least telling me like, hey, this type of ADU or this type of build costs between this amount and this amount, and really kind of like set the tone to get around those like pesky like what's your budget question, because obviously if our budget's $200,000 and we want to build a garage conversion like ADU, like that isn't really, it doesn't really make sense, you know what I mean? So yeah, I think just framing it in a different sense of like how much should things cost given the state of the world versus how much can we afford is different.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. Is that where you started? You said, "Let me figure out how much this costs," and start doing research based on that.
Yeah, my my original thought process was I met two like contractors on my own here, and I was a little bit overwhelmed just based off of like the variety of what they were telling me. And that's kind of how I found Realm. I found it through like Google SEO. Came up at the perfect timing. I definitely felt like, hey, if I'm taking on this like responsibility of helping my mom in like a real world setting, like a lot's riding on it regarding retirement, like I need some sort of cheerleader or someone who's going to be there for me and tell me what's right and what's wrong and kind of like set the foundation for what we're trying to do.
I love it. So, sounds like you met with a couple contractors on your own, but then that's a frustrating process in some ways. You started
Yeah.
doing some Google foo. You find Realm, and what was that process like? How did you book the first appointment, kind of thing? What did they go through with you?
Yeah, I liked how the first advisory call was free. That was definitely a plus to get in the room. I think what really kind of sold me over is there was three different types of ADUs that we could have built. We could have built like a garage conversion with an above unit. We could have done a detached ADU in our backyard, or we could have just done like a simple garage conversion. And the advisor that I was on the phone with, or who I met with on Zoom, kind of like laid out those three options, how they would increase our home equity value, how much would they roughly cost, and we kind of like made a decision on what works best for us based off that decision.
And then because you're thinking about rental, do they work through like, hey, how much do you think this would rent for once it's finished?
They kind of gave me rough estimates off of three different options.
Yeah. So do you remember roughly what your kind of range was between the three options you talked about?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but I know the garage conversion made the most sense for us as it pertains to like how much it built, how much the cash flow it can produce, and comparing that to how much like it would cost to build it.
Yeah. So you lined up the three options and you're like, hold on, I could convert the garage for much less than building a second floor on top of it or doing a whole new structure. And the cash from a rental.
Roughly the
It,
same, yeah.
yeah. So that penciled out. That made sense. What was the next step?
The next step was, I guess, knowledge sharing, meeting with a bunch of different family friends, chatting with my realm advisor off of like the different contractors that I was meeting. I really wanted to like set a tone or like set like a limit in my head, like, hey, I need to meet like seven contractors and go off of, are the vibes there? Are they asking the right questions? Like how business casual, or like how are they presenting themselves? Is there trust there? So I think based off that was like the next step is I wanted to meet X amount of contractors to where I felt comfortable with, and that advisor ended up setting up I think two or three of those appointments, which was super helpful, like scheduling and time saving wise.
That's cool. And so this is great because I always recommend people do this. I say, hey, use Realm to get two or three builders in and get bids, but also shop around on your own, get the family referral. Like they'll help compare all the bids, right? Did you bring your own bids to the table and your advisor help you with people that you found?
Yes, like at the end, I ended up bringing all the bids for my advisor, and I was actually lucky enough. It worked out really well for us, where the first bid that I got is essentially the contractors who we ended up going with. It's funny how it worked out that way. But a big part of that was originally they were out of Realms network, and in the process of like the month deciding of which contractor we're going with, they ended up being within Realm system. So it worked out. It worked out really well for us, to be honest.
That's really cool. Okay, so this is a good example where you went off, you did some personal shopping to compare to the bids that Realm was getting you, and you ended up using one of the people you found, not one of the people that was already in the Realms network.
Yes, who happened to be converting into Realms network about 2 weeks later,
That's
which
amazing. And they were in the funnel. And so this is a perfect example. I always tell people like doing this process, it takes so much time to get builders to actually come out and then to vet
yeah.
them and then to do all the follow up. And so you did the smart thing. You hire Realm, and even if you hadn't, even if they hadn't joined the network, you had the pleasure of or the comfort of having like 7 bids side by side, and you were able to talk to your advisor about all of it. That's really cool. So I think. And it's the first one, isn't that something? It's like
Yeah,
the beginner's luck, right?
I
So
think
do you remember the sort of cheapest bid and the most expensive bid that you got?
yep. The cheapest bid was, I believe, 108, and the most expensive bid was 170.
Okay, so pretty big fork, relatively speaking. And then the person you picked, where did they start off on that spectrum?
They were the cheapest one.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
And over the course of the project, over the course of the negotiation, did you have to do anything else? Did you get anything else added in, or you just went with them?
Just kind of went with them and figured out change orders ad hocly. Um, yeah, I'd say that was like the main discussion points that we were having.
Cool. And so, talk to me about the process. Once you picked that builder, uh, what was it like? What were the next steps?
Yeah, we broke ground fairly quickly, like because LA basically had like the expedited permit process. We kind of flew through that system, so they were able to like break ground fairly quickly, and we were lucky enough to where our garage like had footings and whatnot, so it wasn't as big of like a tear down. Um, yeah, so we ended up just tearing down, starting the building process. Um, I was here, I was working remotely and kind of like balancing my job and checking in on what's going on, which was fun. A little bit head scratching at times, but I mean, I'm very grateful for the experience because if I ever like want to renovate in the future, I feel like my really like close down that knowledge gap there.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And that's one of the interesting things, right? Because when Mary Ellen was saying, "Oh yeah, he handled it like a pro," it's hard. Have you done any projects like this before?
Nothing on this scale, no. This
What's the
was
biggest remodel or whatever contractor project you've worked on?
it was I did like flooring outside of like I basically made the cement look better outside of the ADU for like curb appeal. Like nothing insane, just stuff that you could like household. I would say like really bad shoddy handyman work is what I did.
And you DIY'd it? You did it yourself?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so you went from DIYing some exterior hardscaping to like building
yeah,
a whole ADU in the backyard, tearing the garage down to studs or tearing it down to foundation.
tearing it down to studs.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow. And managing the whole process. Okay, so when did you pick your builder? Like month wise, month and year
Month wise, it would have to be August
of which year again? Sorry,
23.
23. August 23. And then how long before you had permits and broke ground with the LA County expedited system?
Actually, I take that back. We started building in August, and then probably decided on the builder mid-June. So, and then the whole permitting process was in between that.
Cool. So you did the LA County expedited permit process. You picked a builder in June, and by August they had broken ground. That's amazing. And then how long before the whole project was done?
With the whole change orders, like I don't think any, I guess, project of this magnitude goes smoothly. I think that's setting yourself up for failure. Um, but long story short,
Probably May, right?
yeah,
2024 was.
it was May of 20. It definitely pushed the timeline a bit. To be fair, we had some change orders, some disagreements over like what was in the scope of contract, but it ended up going in our way, which shout out that. But everything within the contract budget wise, we stayed the same. The only thing that shifted was timeline wise. The project manager and the actual construction company had some issues internally, um, which prolonged the construction itself. Like we were fully permitted and ready to go. Like the blue tape process of the final changes maybe took 4 out of the 10 months of
Oh,
build.
okay.
Yeah,
So this is good. I always want to get into the meat. Every project's got
different. Yeah.
challenges, right? And that's kind of the interesting part. I kind of want to pick on two things that you've talked about. One is that you went with the cheapest bid, but there were change orders. So
Mhm.
how expensive did the project end up being when everything was said and done?
Yeah, we agreed upon a 108 construction price, not including the 5,000 or the roughly 7,500 of like architecture and permitting. Um, it ended up the final change orders ended up being I think $6,000 more than that.
Oh, okay. That's
I fought very hard. I was not willing to get finessed, as the kids say.
yeah. Well, that's you did your job
Yeah,
because you ended up well within the margin of error, right? Like that's totally reasonable number of change orders. But talk to me about the process. Like what came up that you thought I shouldn't be paying for this? This is within scope.
what actually came up was the shower door. Um, it necessarily like this is a great example because they didn't necessarily know, I guess, building like permitting wise that it would need like a custom shower door. They thought they could put like a generic
Standard size.
standard size.
Mhm.
Which they came back and they were like, "Hey, we have to build a custom size. Like, we didn't account for this. Can you pay for it?" And I was like, "Absolutely not. Like, that's not what I'm gonna do." And that was like a 2 week back and forth regarding that.
So let's go into that example. That's
Yeah.
great. Thank you for sharing it.
Mhm.
And so when you kind of go to your original, first of all, did you handle the communications or did Realm kind of chip in and help?
I handled all of them. All
Okay.
of them.
And then because you wanted to go in hard. And so you had the original agreement. Did it have like a scope of work or a finishing schedule that you used to say, "Hey, this is what it says."
I wish it did. The contract that we primarily had basically just covered like when the payments would occur based off of which timeline. So a majority of like the miscommunications happened after the the payment terms because once the permits are like the drywall, or I forgot, like I don't know what the last permits are, but I think it's drywall, or I don't know, whatever the last permit is when we gave that last like $27,000 because they split it up by five based off of like permits. Um, and most of that miscommunication and kind of headache happened after like that last bit of some.
Yeah.
So
Once you'd paid most of the project, the
yeah.
builders got a little cagey. Okay.
Yeah, so it was mostly just me being like my mom's advocate, my advocate, um, and also I guess hearing and relying on other people who've kind of been in the industry of what's fair and what's not, and kind of maintaining that balance of being firm but also having a good relationship and what's fair for the contractor. Because at the end of the day, I'm not trying to add more to the contractor's plate of what's in scope. So kind of like coming up to a compromise while being like my own advocate.
I love it. That's great advice. Do you mind? Do you have other examples like the shower door that you want to talk about? Like stuff that
Yes,
came up?
the window trim, that was a nightmare to put in. Ended up getting, I wanted to match the window trim to like the main home rather than just the trim being bare in the garage. So that was a big process to be like, hey, you're already like a month behind schedule. The least you could do is spend like, I don't know, like $500 on materials and put some trim. Um, Another example was because they felt bad because they were so far behind schedule. We ended up doing like an EV charger, and they ended up installing the EV charger for free. So that was very nice of them. Um, I can think of another thing was like probably the biggest headache throughout the whole thing was after the tenant moved in, the one of the AC mini splits that we bought two of them. One of them just stopped working. That happens. It's not anyone's fault. Um, but basically, it was like a competition of, is the manufacturer dodging blame? Is the contractor dodging blame? When it's like, hey, I just want my AC unit fixed. Like it's brand new. So like let's get it fixed here, guys. Um, but it ended up working out with the manufacturer. Just it was a very lengthy process of lack of accountability on everyone's end.
Yeah. So that's you. You're the taskmaster, Zach. You're like, I
Yes.
have a warrant. I have like 2 warranties.
Yeah,
Somebody fix it.
my cortisol levels were not very healthy in the healthy range. But long story short, we are here where we are today. We have a tenant in there who's an amazing tenant, takes care of the place, loves the place. The finishings, I don't know, maybe I can send you some old Zillow ads, but the way that the ADU looked before um, our tenant moved in was beautiful. It was very well done.
I
The
was
fi-
ready to move in there,
yes,
even though it was a little small for
it
me.
was a little small, but the finishings were great. It was well laid out. It was a very nice ADU.
I like it. So you loved it. You were ready to move in yourself. And is it cash flowing the way you were hoping? You like the tenant. You like the rent. It's working
Yeah,
Yes.
out.
I could be honest with the financials. I think that's would be helpful for everyone. We ended up financing it through a HELOC. Our interest rate is too high to share, I guess, but it's in the realm of like 9%. We're looking at ways to refinance it, but long story short, we our payments are I think a little under 1,300, and we're cash flowing 2 grand out of the garage. So
That's
shout out
great. And that
garage.
creates a little bit of income, just like you'd
Yeah.
hoped. Also, it creates a little cushion where you're gonna have to do repairs and stuff as the AC convinced you very early on.
Yes,
And
yes.
so
Also,
eventually
it
those will be
gave
out of
us
pocket.
huge incentive to clean out my garage,
I love it.
which was
A nightmare.
a nightmare in itself. It was a huge undertaking and 27 years of things in that garage that I didn't even know existed. So that was just a freeing moment knowing we got through that whole garage and, purged and saved some of the things that we needed, memorabilia and, special meaning things. So, but yeah, when it was done, I was everything brand new and just so modern, contemporary. Zach did all the choosing of the, interiors. He did a great job with the color scheme. And I walked in there and I go, I want to live here.
Great. I love it. And thank you so much for that detail about the garage. So it was pretty full. It was 27 years of stuff.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it was ceiling to floor.
We had a pod for like 3 months preparing to break ground. It was
A pod in the driveway.
yeah, it was a fun experience moving that much stuff.
And then did you end up, kind of downsizing that, or did you have to build
Oh yeah.
storage?
No, no storage built. It was just a lot of purging, garage sales. We had 2 huge garage sales, and some of the items ended up going in the main house. And so that's my next project, organizing the main house to accommodate and find a place for everything.
I love it. I love it. Always a project. And who you know who your foreman's going to be. You've already got somebody.
Exactly.
Okay. So once you had it done, how did you actually find the tenant, Zach?
So it was the same thing, interviewing different property management companies and going with the person who I felt I liked the most and was the most qualified, um, and just relying on their expertise and their judgment, showing us multiple candidates who are interested, and just comparing all the different factors that goes into um, living right next to someone. So, like for example, when we were chatting with someone, we entirely missed the point where we could be noisy too. So just communicating like, hey, like we're very like quiet people. Um, we kind of like that same environment. Do we mesh on that standpoint? Um, and just kind of knowing where your values lie and kind of letting a professional carry the way. And then also knowing that, hey, the unit is new. Odds of something going terribly wrong are fairly low, and there's no point in letting someone take 10% doing something that's so low maintenance. So
This is all fascinating, honestly. So like what you're talking about a lot there. So for most of the people who finish their ADU and intend to rent it or rent out the primary, they can either find their own tenant and they have to kind of learn how to be landlords. They have to learn all the rules about fair housing and advertising and figure out the whole tenant screening process in a way that's legal and fair. And they have to have the skill to pick out a tenant that's going to be a good match. They have to know that stuff
Right.
about themselves, like when are we rolling out the trash and all that, all these little details that property managers are used to thinking about. And so you specifically interviewed property managers to help you find tenants.
Mhm.
And you, what kind of deal do you work on? Because the way most people, the way I'm used to thinking about property managers is that they find you the tenant, but then they're collecting a percentage of that rent and they're responsible for minimizing vacancy. But you're
Mhm.
sounding like you did more of the upfront work with them, not the long-term work. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so I just did like the tenant finding process. So they created the ad, they paid for a they paid for a professional photographer to come in, take like a stellar photos of the unit, make it look really nice. Much bigger than what it is, candidly. But yeah, just using them for just tenant seeking purposes, and then relying on their judgment based off of like California laws, making sure that the screening is fair and legal. That's something that I know I'd be way in over my head of.
Right.
And do
So
they charge a percentage or a one-time fee?
yep, it was a one-time fee around $1,000 just to find a vetted tenant who would live there for a year.
And that's a great investment. That's a great way to think about it. Cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. You guys have really gone through the whole process and already have the happy tenant. It's great to see an ADU fulfilling its purpose. Thank you so much. So to recap, you've got a beautiful new ADU. It's like it was a 2-car garage before,
Yes,
so it's like
21 by
450.
20.
Sorry,
21 by 20.
21 by 20. Finished right around 110 to 120,000, something like that.
Yes, I think we had to buy our own appliances
Sure.
with permits, building, appliances, all in. I think it was 125.
Nice, nice. And you've already got a tenant that you like. This is everything. Good job,
I know.
guys.
Yes.
I know.
It's really cool. Thank you so much for sharing this experience, guys. It's gonna help a lot of people. And good job on getting your ADU done.
Thanks.
Yes.
All right. If for people who want to learn more about how to work with Realm, check out this video up here. And if you want a playlist about how to get more bids and what to look for in that agreement, check out this.